Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Laundromat Millionaire Show, sponsored by HM Company at DrainTroughs.com. Today, we have a revisiting guest, Mike Finger of Exit Oasis. If you did not catch episode 81, you will definitely want to catch that. Mike is a consultant on making your business more sellable. Episode 81 goes into the 3 steps he recommends for all business owners to do that, because not only will it make it easier to sell your business if you ever want to, but also make the management of your business more enjoyable while you have it. So definitely check out episode 81. But after many people asking for it, we have Mike rejoining our podcast and going into his laundromat journey. And this is an episode where you will learn a lot, not just about some of the struggles in acquiring a laundromat, but also the due diligence that you need to do. And if you want to, possibly sell it and how to make it sellable once you're ready.
Yeah, Mike is kind of an expert on these things, which is why we've had him on the show not only once, but twice. But today he's going to actually share his journey very authentically of him buying a laundromat, the 18 months it took of due diligence and how he walked away from the deal several times. And then he talks about the things he learned along his own laundromat journey that allowed him to become the coach and consultant today that he is. He owns a company called Exit Oasis. And Mike and I connected through LinkedIn, and I have just fallen in love with his content and his posts, and we are constantly back and forth. Good posts, good video, good whatever. The guy is just he's doing something really important, and even though he has owned a laundromat before, if he hadn't, everything he's teaching would still be very applicable to the laundromat industry. It's a lot of things that I'm talking about with people, and even Carla, our own journey of how we went through kind of this first 5 years of being micromanagers and doing a lot of things ourselves and not making a lot of money, to the next 5 years of being very profitable but still working full-time in the business. And then really the last 5 years as we built our management team and our structure. I mean, I feel like we always had pretty good books, but to build the team that, once again, he uses the word sellable. A business is much more valuable if you have great bookkeeping and you have a great team, and you're not required to operate the business day to day, because anyone can acquire that business and step into it and run it. You can walk away because you weren't needed from the get-go. And basically what we talk about this episode of today is kind of how it changed his life and how it's changed our life. So hopefully you get a lot of value out of that.
But before we get started, just a quick spotlight on our last Laundromat Millionaire Wash, Dry, Fold, and Delivery Workshop of 2025, which is coming up soon, November 4th and 5th, and we are approaching sellout. So if you are interested in joining us for 2 intense days of training on how to launch, scale, and optimize wash, dry, fold, and delivery services out of your laundromat, definitely check us out on our website at laundromatmillionaire.com for more information. But let's go ahead and get started with this episode and learn more from Mike.
The goal isn't to do a deal. It's to do a good deal. Because a bad deal, it's destroying. There's no amount of money that a bad deal can't suck out of your wallet.
The acquisition, if you overpay for a store, depending on how much you overpay, the odds that you're going to ever dig out of that are very low.
All right. So Mike, welcome back to the show. It's so good to see you again.
Thrilled to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've only had a few guests that have had multiple appearances so far in our first 100 episodes or so. So we're honored to have you back. And you know this because we talked offline, but a big part of why we wanted to have you back is because, one, we feel like we left a little meat on the bone because you brought so much meat to the conversation. For those of you that don't remember, Mike was a guest on episode 81. And Mike is a, should I use the word coach? Is that the word you like to use?
That's the word, yep.
Yeah, so Mike coaches people on preparing their business for exit and then eventually helping them to reach exits. And he's not like a lot of coaches or consultants out there where they coach things they haven't actually done. Mike's actually done this. And in the first episode that we had him on back in episode 81, he talked through the steps of kind of the framework that he uses to help people prepare mentally and business-wise for their exit and to prepare their business and things like that. But the truth is, Mike, if I say anything out of line, let me know here. But from my perspective, I think Mike came to these conclusions by doing it for himself first. That seems to be kind of my observation. And so today, Mike is going to share with us the other side of his story of how he did this for himself and how he came to these discoveries. I know a lot of people that are watching and listening to the show are laundromat owners. And I tell people all the time that roughly 70-80% of business is all applicable and transferable from industry to industry. Mike does have experience in other businesses and other industries and exits in those as well. But he actually owned a laundromat for about 5 years, and he prepared that for exit and was able to sell it for a lot more than he paid for it. And so that's the story that he's going to share with us today. So for those of you that are what we call laundromat nerds in the industry, you're going to like this because this is kind of the other side of the equation from the last episode. And I know a few of you reached out to me after the episode and kind of wished he had shared a little bit more of his personal journey and what he did with his actual laundromat in his local community. And that's what this episode is all about. So we hope you like it.
Excellent. I'm excited to be back and to tell this story because I do think this captures the journey. And just quick background, I've been lucky enough to own 8 small businesses. I've sold 4. I failed twice. I still own 2. I had occasion to work as a business broker for a year. I've had a number. I've gotten to sit on different sides of the table as it comes to this transaction piece. And like I said, I feel like I love the industry, and I think this story was a real good capture for me. So
I think there's a lot for people to gain from not just the exit, which we'll eventually get to, but your acquisition. And did it go all perfectly smooth? And what did you do?
Well, if it took 18 months, probably not.
That's so funny. Okay, so let me set the stage. I've been out of ownership for a couple of years. Like I said, I had worked as a broker for about a year, loved part of that, hated part of that. Full transparency, I didn't make a lot of money as a broker. I learned a lot, and I had some weird occurrences. I actually had a listing of mine burned to the ground one night. So I'd done that for a while. I had worked at an incubator helping startup and growth companies start up and grow faster. And I had missed the ownership bug. My first business, which I had sold 2 or 3 years before that, I'd owned for 15 years, had built from scratch to 50 full-time employees. And so that was a fairly complicated business. And I was looking for something at least that I thought would be a little simpler. And so I was looking in the laundromat and car wash space. And so started my search. And as I'm sure you two have experienced, I knew every laundromat within an hour of my home, right? Mm-hmm. I had them all mapped out. I had specs on owners. I was out looking, and there wasn't a lot of activity. There wasn't a lot to look at until I landed at the end of 2012 on a listing on a laundromat service center about an hour from my home. I'll call it a service center because in addition to the laundromat, it had 3 manual car wash bays and an automatic car wash. Lots of stuff going on at the facility. The facility was owned by an absentee, semi-retired airline pilot. He had built it some, 5-10 years earlier. The facility was managed by a part-time manager who ran like 2 or 3 part-time employees. So he's got a $950,000 asking price on it, and he's saying cash flow of $150,000 a year. So I'm at a 6.3 multiple. Not great, but not nosebleed compared to some of what I had seen out there. And given the fact that there wasn't a lot of activity, I thought I'll check it out. I mentioned before we started your due diligence episode from a few episodes back, and you started that episode by talking about the process of making an offer before you do due diligence. And that was something I had learned as a business broker, and so was able to approach this. All they had shared with me was the front page of the tax return. I didn't have a P&L. I didn't have any details. Front page of the tax return, $950 purchase price, ballpark of multiples. So I did I don't want to say I did my due diligence. I did my upfront diligence, right? I went and did some laundry. I drove around the neighborhood. I felt like I had a good sense for the marketplace and the opportunity. And so I made an offer, 4.3 multiple. So that put me at about 630. So he's asking 950. I offer 630. And lo and behold, they accepted the offer.
Wow.
And so I was really excited and a little skeptical. It's one of those
That was
things where
too
it's
easy?
like, yeah, exactly. It's like,
Why was this so easy?
why has it been listed as long as it have and not sold?
Why would they take $300K off that easily?
Why would they take $300K off that easily? That said, I knew it needed a new roof. I knew there were reasons for that offer and for the added cost that was going to come from being a new owner there.
Whether you already have a laundromat or are looking to get into the laundry industry, everyone needs proper drainage. We use HM Company drain troughs. Their drain troughs were first created in 1991, and they have been the leading drain trough manufacturer ever since. They're made in the USA, and their drain troughs are fully customizable to meet your needs. That's why we've used them ever since entering the industry. They're easy to clean for our staff and plenty sturdy when we need to walk on them when servicing our washers. With the ability to span up to 25 feet, our troughs rarely need to be connected together, creating an easy installation. Want to slope your trough like we do? No problem. Just let the experts at HM Company know. For more information, go to their website at draintroughs.com. That is draintroughs.com. HM Company Drain Troughs. They've been leading the industry since 1991. Check them out today.
And so it got accepted and I started my due diligence, right? I started diving in. And again, to anyone who hasn't listened yet, go back and listen to that due diligence episode that Carla and Dave did. Excellent. Anyways, so I'm doing that due diligence. The broker is, how do I describe it? The broker is not forthcoming. It becomes very clear very quickly that he doesn't have answers to very many questions. He didn't have the financials to give me, right? Hey, the owner's not going to give information to anyone who hasn't made an offer. Okay, I get that. No problem. Here's an offer. They accept. So lo and behold, I'm at a restaurant meeting with the owner. This is going to be our big due diligence meeting. And we get together and he comes in with his banker box full of records, right? I think, all right, now I'm finally going to see the good stuff. And we proceed to start that conversation and it becomes very clear that it's a game of dodge. I ask a question, he dodges with the answer. I ask another question, I'll scan through the box. I don't have that piece of paper on me. I'll have to take a look, right? I'm looking through all of those. I don't know, we're there 15, 20 minutes. It's not going great. I reach into my folder and I pull out a form called the 8821. This is an IRS form that my banker gave me. And he said, I need you to get the seller to fill out this form. So I slide it across the table to the seller and I said, well, okay, I need you to fill out this form. He said, well, what's this form? They said, well, this is the form that will allow the IRS to release your tax returns directly to my banker. So they can bypass you. They can just confirm that what you've shown me is what you showed the IRS. And he gets dead silent and pale. And he says, that's going to be a problem. What do you mean that's going to be a problem? Well, what I shared with you wasn't the real tax returns. And so, of course, my head, this literally happened. It was like I had gotten hit in the stomach and my head just bent forward until it was resting on the table in front of me. And of course, I threw my hands in the air and said, I don't see how there's any way we can possibly move forward. And I left the restaurant and I called the broker and chewed him out. Hey, your seller's a liar. How dare you do this to me? Hang up the phone. The stories come to an end. I'm a firm believer that honesty in a transaction like this is binary. You either have it or you don't.
100%.
Once you learn that the seller is willing to lie to you about X, you should assume they're willing to lie to you about A through Z. And so for me, that was a non-starter, pushed it off to the corner of my desk, and 3 months goes by. And there's nothing happening in the marketplace. I'm not finding anything. The business is still listed for sale.
Did you try at all making offers to places that weren't for sale, or were you just focused on places that were actually listed?
I had done my due diligence. I went as far as to use a drop note strategy. I don't know if if you've used those before, but this is me going by with an envelope that reads confidential to owner, sliding it under the service door of laundromats. Hey, my name's Mike. I'm interested in buying. If you ever interested. So yes, I was out there shaking the bushes, looking for opportunities. Okay. So 3 months goes by. I go back to the broker and I said, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm still interested in the property. I will have nothing to do with the owner, right? I'm not dealing with this guy at all, but I would like to see if there's some way that I can figure out the information that I need to know in order to make a deal happen. And so what I said was, what I'm going to need is I'm going to need full access to the bank that the owner uses. I'm going to need to request information directly from the bank, statements, documentation on deposits. Again, I'm going to ignore the owner and I'm just going to go directly to the source. And I said, if you give me that, then we'll see if I can put something together.
So still the owner would have to release all that to you. So you had the broker kind of work as a middleman between you and the owner?
No,
to get those releases?
Great question. What I did is I had the broker have the owner tell the bank to share anything with me that I asked them to. So I wasn't going to get a statement from the owner.
No, it would come directly from the bank.
Directly from the bank. And so, yes, he had to give permission for me to get access. And so the broker came back and he said, well, the owner's willing to do that, but only if you make another offer. And so I went from 630 to an offer of 420. So I dropped another 35% in my offer and they accepted. And so I dove into due diligence round 2. So I said, I need full access to the bank. I also need full access to the part-time manager. And I talked briefly with the part-time manager before. It was clear he was no fan of the owner, of the current owner. He wanted to see a transition take place. Okay, so
and he appeared to be more honest, I guess.
Yes, I think that's absolutely a fair statement. And he subsequently, it turns out, he's not benefiting from any of the bad decisions that the owner's making. Right?
Yeah.
The manager tells me it's not uncommon for the owner to show up and empty the cash machine and drive away. But the dynamic here was a weird one, because it wasn't as if he was claiming, well, he was claiming a much higher revenue at this point. Anyways, so I go to the bank and I get the statements and I start reconstructing the last 3 years, right? What check got written? Who did it get written to? What were the utility bills actually? All of those sorts of things. So an expense infrastructure starts to come together. I can kind of see what that is. And what becomes very apparent is he's been losing money since the first day he built it. The financing costs on the build, killing him. And so it's a loser from day one for him. So again, the expense structure starts to come together, but I don't know if you two are accountants by training or trade, but
I am, but he's not.
Sure. So you know that numbers are weird, right? You know that you go to do a reconciliation and this number is different than this number and they're different. Anyways, so
you got to figure out why they're different.
Yeah, right? Sometimes it's purely coincidental and sometimes it's more nefarious than. So I look at the first year of deposits and one of the things I find is a repeating number. It's like $1,877.83. And that amount got deposited like 3 or 4 times in the first year. And I'm like, that's really weird for a cash-based business, right? It's weird that somebody would dump a bucket of quarters and it comes out to exactly that number 3 times. So I reach out to the bank and I say, show me this deposit slip, show me what came along with it. Well, it turns out that he had deposited his pension check from the airline into the business 3 times that year.
To make it look like the revenue was higher.
Well, I can only assume at that point that he just needed the cash flow. right? That
Okay.
he had to pay
Yeah,
a bill. And
yeah.
so he threw the money in there.
Probably didn't even account for it correctly.
I'm certain that's the case, Dave, that he didn't
Mhm.
account for it correctly. I also then saw things in there like check for pontoon storage, or as I started to get the documentation on the checks that were actually deposited, what became really clear is that the cash flow of this business was going to be impossible to tie down. That not only you and I both know that sometimes expenses get goofy and sometimes revenue gets goofy on the low side. Oh, I pocketed the cash. This number should be higher. But this was the opposite, right? This was
Yeah.
a case where the revenue itself was inflated and should have been lower. And so again, this for me was one of those, I don't know how I can move forward on this.
Yeah.
I don't see a way to get to a place where I can make any reasonable estimate. I also discover in that due diligence that there's unpaid property tax. And we know that when you deal with the government and what they're owed, that becomes a different ballgame than any other outstanding vendor account. It was just a hot mess. And so once again, threw in the towel. I told the broker, I can't do it. I have no way to get to what I need to get to.
What about the utilities? I know a lot of people in the industry like to look at utilities as far as using that to estimate revenue. Did you not feel like that was, I know we're kind of iffy on that too, because there's so many variables there as far as, how efficient are the machines and all that kind of stuff. But did you not feel like the utilities could give you an idea of the revenue?
I started down that road, but that's where the complexity of the facility came in. With the car washes, with those other elements, water wasn't going to get me there.
Yeah.
And the same with power. It was, could I ballpark? Maybe. But again, given how squirrely everything had gotten and keep in mind at this point, I'm sitting across the street from the place counting cars that are going through the car wash. I'm there once or twice a week doing laundry, right? I'm doing, again, to your due diligence episode, I'm watching, I'm counting, I'm trying to figure out, but it just became really clear that there was no trail of breadcrumbs to follow, right?
Yeah.
There was no clear path. And so I was following the breadcrumbs. And, I thought it was interesting that I had gotten the access that I did. And it was ironic. After I canceled the second offer, the broker asked me out to lunch. I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. Is he calling to complain, tell me that he's dumping the listing, whatever? No, he was taking me out to lunch because he wanted to ask me for my financial analysis so he could add it to the business for sale record because he had just renewed the listing.
My goodness.
So it was clear that I wasn't just dealing with a squirrely seller. My broker lacked a little ethical compass as well.
Is your laundromat ready to become the neighborhood's #1 choice? LaundroBoost has proven strategies to help your business flourish.
I think we saw changes pretty quick before that 4-month range. I'm in that 4-month range now, and we're seeing changes left and right. I mean, pickup and delivery clients, drop-off clients, self-service clients, businesses up as a whole.
Literally, it was shocking to watch the numbers jump. I wish I would have kept, I could go back and I could begin to track these things, which I have done, to see what percentage growth we had, but it wasn't unusual to go up 30% per month.
At LaundroBoost, we specialize in fueling laundromat growth. Through targeted Google ads and powerful social media campaigns, we make your location stand out and attract loyal customers. Ready to level up your laundromat? Visit laundroboostmarketing.com and book a call with us for a free consultation.
Okay, so what happened next?
Yes, well, exactly, right?
You no, this deal's still not working. Even seeing your bank records, it's still not clear because your revenue might be it's definitely overstated because you're depositing checks that aren't from the business. But then we also don't know how much it's understated because how often are you just stopping by and using it as your personal piggy bank?
Exactly.
Can't tell what the revenue actually is.
Carla, you nailed it. Not only that, I got to put a new roof on. There's electrical work that needs to happen. There's past due property taxes. It's just...
What about the age of the machines? Was there going to be a lot of investment there too?
My sense was no. At that point, I'm pretty green. I've got I've got some single load washers that are going to need to be replaced in the next 2 or 3 years. It was a Dexter shop. Those were not that old, and just given their the turn count estimated based on a ballpark of revenue, I didn't have too many concerns there.
Okay.
The car wash equipment was another thing entirely. Yeah. So again, threw in the towel. That's it. I'm done. This next section, I think, probably took about 6 months. In that time, he lost the property. The bank bought it back at sheriff's auction. They cleaned the property tax debt. They did some of the basic repairs that the manager had wanted that said needed to be made. And then I went to the bank and I bought the place for $290,000. Because banks don't like to run laundromats.
No.
And so that was about 18 months after I had first tripped across the listing and made my first offer. A roller coaster up and down and sideways. I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had done the broker thing. I knew enough to have confidence in my ability to dig into these things. But I had no idea how squirrely something like this could get. Yeah, so I'm at the beginning of 2014. I now own this property, and
Before you move on with your story, Mike, I just want to point out to people. I talk about it all the time in my coaching calls. There's really two people, in my opinion, two types of people that enter the due diligence phase. While your journey is certainly unique in some ways, it's really not all that unique in the totality of it.
Right.
Especially in the laundry industry, because so many operators don't have clear financials. And being a cash-based business, so many times, even the bank records aren't a true reflection.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out a couple of things I just want to call attention to. One of them is we always tell people, 3 to 5 years of bank statements, et cetera, for due diligence. I think you pointed out something that's never really I'm going to now incorporate into my coaching, which is asking for the bank directly for those versus asking for someone. It's, we like to, I know I tend to be a little bit naive, and somebody sends me bank records and they look official. I just assume they're real. Right. But the only way to know for sure is to actually pull them from the IRS, is to actually get them from the bank, et cetera. So I think there's another layer of due diligence here and verification that people a lot of times don't think about. But the thing I wanted to point out here is the timeline. It's not uncommon for an acquisition from the very beginning of the process to the end of the process. Sometimes it takes 6 months to even find the location, right? But it's not uncommon for it to take 12 to 24 months. And I tell almost every newbie that I talk to that is still searching for a location and hasn't found one yet, it's much more important that you get the information right, that the information is accurate, and that you get a fair valuation of the real picture of what the business is than how long it takes.
100%.
So many newbies and I was there too, by the way, full disclosure, like so many newbies get so excited and they let their emotions kind of take over. I'm not saying that this owner did this, but it wouldn't be uncommon for a seasoned business owner to recognize that and take advantage of that. So I guess one of the things that I always coach people on is I always say, I would rather this take 24 months. And when you get to closing, you've hit a home run. Maybe you didn't hit a grand slam, but you also didn't strike out or hit a single. You hit a home run. This is going to be a solid, profitable business for you. Because I have so many people come to me in my coaching program and they come to me 8, 10, 12, 24 weeks after they acquired the store, and they are already in a heap of trouble that I cannot help them with.
They're in that situation where they bought that business at 6X and they're like, crap.
And I always say, I wish you'd called me 20 weeks ago, et cetera. Because a lot of this stuff just jumps out to people like me and you that do this all the time. So I just wanted to call attention to that because that's an example. We talked about this offline, Mike. That's one of those things people don't want to hear, right? They don't want to hear from their coach. They want to hear, yeah, it's easy. Let's find a laundromat, pull the bank statements, get the IRS records, and we're going to be good to go and pay 3X of a multiple and you're going to be a millionaire, right?
Right.
That's what everybody wants to hear. And the truth is
income, Dave.
Yeah, passive income. Yeah. And the truth is that sometimes that does happen, but it's very rare. And the truth is that you should have an attitude of however long this takes, that's how long it'll take. If it takes 24 months, then so be it.
To your point, Dave, it's hard, right? I mean, let's be honest. It is hard to want to buy a business and see the days go by and the weeks and the months go by and nothing happened, and to then see an opportunity and see somebody else swoop in and buy it because they're willing to make a dumb decision that somebody told you shouldn't make. And we forget that the goal isn't to do a deal. It's to do a good deal.
That's right.
Because a bad deal just it's destroying. There is nothing, there's no amount of money that a bad deal can't suck out of your wallet. It just takes and takes and takes.
And I'm sure you do too, Mike, but I see it all the time and it just breaks my heart. Because like I said, I'm like, if you'd called me 6 weeks ago, the first thing I would have done is just absolutely threw a hissy fit. It'd be like, you cannot go to closing with this. And that's not what anybody wants to hear. That's not what they pay me for, right? Or at least that's not what they think they pay me for. So, and I'm sure the same applies to you. So I just wanted to call attention to that before we move on in the story, because that literally is half the battle. The acquisition, if you overpay for a store, the odds that you're going to, depending on how much you overpay, the odds that you're going to ever dig out of that are very low. And you might dig out of it, but man, you may put yourself in a 10-year hole. Well, we only have so much time here on earth, right? And man, if we have to spend 10 years digging out of a hole that we could have avoided by just being patient, checking our emotions at the door, maybe hiring a mentor and a coach, or at least watching some podcast episodes and things like that. I mean, I hate to say it, but a lot of things are working against you in an acquisition. You know, the owner certainly is working against you typically. And it's just such a sad thing that's very common. And I think it's more common in our industry because we are a cash-based business. It's so easy to do and get away with.
One of the things that called out to me from this experience, you know, the owner didn't know, the seller didn't know this, or he knew and decided to ignore it. But the truth is that most buyers have to get outside funding.
Sure.
And so all of this process, all of this due diligence wasn't about me. It was about satisfying a banker who wants that 88 form filled out, or that, you know, has certain debt to income requirements. That was one of the things at the end of this story, is there was nobody that was going to finance that purchase. So I ended up having to write a check for the whole amount.
Would you like to make more money from your laundromat? Would you like those machines you're paying for to have more turns per day? Do you offer wash, dry, fold services or pick up and delivery laundry services? If not, would you like to? Whether you do or not, we have an amazing opportunity for you in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah, you've probably heard about it, guys, but it's our wash, dry, fold, pick up and delivery workshop. And to answer your first question, yes, it is for drop-off laundry, wash, dry, fold, and pick up and delivery. So if you're doing any of those things, this workshop is going to help you tremendously. But the truth is, we were pretty so-so laundromat owners and so-so successful until we launched drop-off laundry and pick up and delivery. And being able to, what I call, optimize your laundromat to generate more profit and more revenue out of the existing facility, that's the key to taking your life from good to great, financially speaking, with laundromats. And that's what made us Laundromat Millionaires.
You don't have to just listen to us. Listen to what some of our past attendees have to say about our Wash, Dry, Fold, Pick Up and Delivery workshop in Cincinnati, Ohio.
It was the best workshop I've attended in over 25 years. And what you guys have put together is nothing short of phenomenal. I think that you guys have put together both strategic and tactical systems that will make an individual who wants to own the laundromat profitable within months, not years.
Was the workshop worth the investment? Without a doubt, it was definitely worth the investment. So not only did we have two very packed days with Dave and Carla and their team, both in the classroom and touring the facilities, but we also came away with this extensive 100-page handbook. And then after the workshop was completed, I received a bunch of electronic performers and templates that we've been able to use since the workshop. Every day since the workshop, I've found myself referring back to either those electronic tools or the handbook I received. So,
was it worth the investment? Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I cannot say that enough. This was such a blessing, and I am so very grateful that Dave and Carla put this together and are sharing their knowledge and experience with others to have this to have this to grow their business and to become more successful. Thank you guys.
So are you interested? Go to laundromatmillionaire.com to learn more and see where you can register.
Here's the other part, and this will help us transition into what comes next, is that as owners of these businesses, we think we're being wise, but the truth is the math does not support you putting that money in your pocket. The math, not the feeling of it, but let's just talk math, because every one of those dollars that you put in your pocket, Dave, Carla, what's the current guess for multiple on a laundromat? What's the average multiple for a laundromat?
Oh my gosh, that varies so much depending on like the age of the machines and everything. Anywhere from what is it, 3x
like
to 5x.
The lazy
So now
answer
they're
in our
getting up
industry
to
is 3 to
6x and 7x.
Oh yeah, 6, 7. I've even seen them as high as 8. You know, if your numbers are all verified and they're accurate, and you're okay with a 10% return on investment, you know, I always say, who am I to tell you not to pay 8? I mean, I wouldn't, but you know, but 3 to 5, 3 to 5 is kind of the lazy answer.
Let's say it's 5. Let's keep the math simple. I put that dollar in my pocket and I've saved 30 cents of taxes. I sell that business and that dollar of profit turns into $5. So my 30 cents saved cost me $5. The math doesn't make sense for these activities.
Well, and I do think, Mike, I'm sure you know this, but just speaking to the audience, I do think that part of the reason that you're 100% accurate, but I think the reason that people often do this is that they don't ever think about the end. They just think about this year or this week or this month or this quarter. And quite often in business, we're sitting here right now at, you know, in our late 40s, me and Carla, and we have this chain of laundromats that, you know, I always say I wouldn't sell for X, and I wouldn't. And people think I'm crazy, and financially it probably is crazy. But that's my baby, and these employees are in a way my family. A lot of them are family and good friends from church, and I literally love what I do, and I don't want to go build it again. And so it's just not for sale, even for a stupid number. But the thing I like to point out to people is, man, it's so short-sighted to think about it through that lens, because the truth is you may not plan on selling your business for 20 or 30 years, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's the old adage of tell God your plans and watch him laugh at you, right? Kind of thing. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen next year. You're exactly right. So I just think it's, you know, playing the long game versus the short game.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think the rest of the story illustrates that.
So we're at the point now you've bought it for $290,000?
$290, yeah.
So significantly cheaper, but you said even at that amount, the bank wouldn't finance it. You had to pay it outright, right?
Number one, the most likely bank to finance that deal is the one who has it already. And they're so tired of that property, there's no way it's staying on their books. I go to any other bank, and what are they going to ask for? 3 years of financials. I know those don't exist, right? So there's no outside financing that's going to work for this business anymore. And so that was just the reality of it. And so that's what I inherit, right? I inherit cranky vendors who haven't been paid consistently. I inherit vendors in the marketplace that won't deal with this property anymore until I explain to them, hey, I'm a new owner. That's not how I do business, blah, blah, blah. So, but to your point, Dave, that's the lesson I had learned at my first business. I had learned that sellability and ownability are the same thing. This isn't, I'm going to run my business this way and then I'm going to make it sellable.
Which is what most people think.
It is. And what they don't know is that the best business to own is one that you could sell tomorrow. Why? Because it meets the 3 criteria, right? Desirable
that we
results.
talked about in episode 81. Just want to tie in there if y'all want to hear it in detail.
Desirable results that a new buyer can duplicate, that you can document. If you can do those 3 things, you have a sellable business. So that's what I started to do with this business, right? I started recording what happened. I tried to make, and he had this part down. He was an absentee owner. So the question of, can you duplicate your results have to do with owners who have created dependency on themselves in the business. And so we started the process of fixing what was broken, bringing some systems into place in the business, and actually recording our revenue the way you're supposed to. That's when you discover that the employees have been paid under the table, which these had. That's when you discover right? So it's, I've got a lot of right sizing to do to this business to get it. And some of those things came with cost. Here's the benefit. Okay, so let's fast forward through that process 2-3 years. I've now got a year or two of clean operating financials bookmarked. Subsequent to the purchase of this business, I had bought a different one. I had bought a car wash in essentially the opposite direction from my home. And I'd owned that one for about 3 years, again, with the intention of doing a turnaround with it. And so here's what happened. Here's how I sold this business. I put a Craigslist ad out for the car wash that I wanted to sell. Hey, car wash for sale, cash flows at the price I'm listing it at, blah, blah, blah. I get a guy who reaches out to me and says, hey, I might be interested. Can I get the details? I do a little research on the guy, and I realize that he lives in the town where this property that we've been talking about is, which is probably a little over an hour from the other one. And so I respond back to him by email and I say, well, listen, I can certainly give you the financials for that one. But in case you're interested, I have a 3 times larger operation just down the street from you. Any interest in that one? Gets back to me, yes, I'm interested. 42 days later, I walked out of the bank with a check for 2.5 times what I paid for that business. I hadn't advertised it for sale. I hadn't listed it. I wasn't paying a commission. But what had happened is I had created in that business a sellable business. And so when somebody raised their hand and said, I might be interested in that, I could say, here are the financials. Here's the documentation. Here's how it runs with employees and the like. Here's the few things I do there. I put in 3 to 5 hours a week. If you're interested, let me know. And that business that 3 or 4 years ago had been unbuyable, unsellable, was sold as easily as I've ever sold a business. Like I said, there was no broker involved. I didn't have to pay any fee. It was just that it was ready to be sold and the right opportunity came along at the right time.
It was just being ran correctly.
It was absolutely. It was that it get frustrated sometimes. And maybe it's just my life experience, but I always get frustrated when people act as if they can predict the future. They run their business as if nothing's going to change and things are going to continue the way they've continued. And I think that's not been my life experience. So why wouldn't you make these changes in your business if the worst case scenario of doing so is that you own a business that's more profitable and easier to run? What would keep you from not, well, maybe it's the math, you say. No, we just did the math, right? 30 cents costs you $5. There is no good reason to not look at your business this way. But you guys tell me, how often do you see owners viewing their business like this?
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's not just that you're pocketing money. There's that side of it. But I think the other part that gets people is, I guess it would fall into the duplicatability. Is that a word?
Yep.
The ability, being able to delegate. Like a lot of times these owners are that's their baby and they don't want to, they like the idea of having a team do it, but then giving up that responsibility to them and trusting them to do it the right way. Like, oh, well, if I do it myself, or sometimes maybe even the savings of, well, I do that myself, it doesn't cost as much. But then that's not making your business sellable, you know?
It also means you're never going on vacation and all of these quality of life issues. And again, I'm assuming you guys have been there. I know I certainly have, where I had to do those things because I couldn't afford to do otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And if that's where you are in your business, I'm right there with you. I've done the 18-hour days. I've crawled under, done some very vile things. As you both know, in this industry, there's opportunities for some very vile things to be required. So
But is it a phase, or is that your
Yeah,
business model.
that's
That's the
right.
difference.
Well,
That's
and I
right.
know, Mike, I know I've shared my story pretty authentically, but I like to always assume in every podcast episode that, people that are listening to this one have never heard the other ones. So I just want to throw this out there real quickly. We are where Mike is describing, right? Now, we didn't have Mike on to brag about this. I talk about it pretty authentically on social media and things like that, on my blog and things like that. But the thing I want to share with people is why I came to that conclusion. And it's actually a little bit different than what we're talking about, Mike. So when we first started our business, I had to do everything ourselves because we were losing money, right? And then I learned something. I raised prices. I invested in equipment. We borrowed some money. We paid some money back. The business was better, but it still always relied on me. And I had a young family at home. And I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I said, man, I've built a good little business here. We weren't millionaires at that point, but I mean, I had built a good little business that I was proud of. That was a very valuable asset for my family. And I looked in the mirror and thought, man, if something happened to me, this whole thing would be done. It'd be cooked because it 100% relied on me. So for me, it wasn't about the sellability of it, at least not in my mind. I always use the analogy that Carla hates. I call it the bus test. And I say from that day forward, I got up every day and said, man, what would happen to my employees and my family if I got hit by a bus? Right. And that's a little morbid, but it's just the truth. And from that day forward, every day, I obsessed and focused on building my business as quickly as possible. And it didn't happen overnight to not need me. And that was so, it wasn't so I could sell it. It was so if I was ever not here, that Carla had an asset that could take care of her and my babies. And by that point, we had 20, 30 employees. Now we have almost 50. And it was just like, I took a lot of weight on my shoulders, responsibility of if this whole business just collapsed and didn't exist, these people would all lose their livelihood. Right. And I just took that responsibility really seriously. So I just want to throw that out there is there's really 4 or 5 different reasons that we should seek to build our businesses, not to be passive, but so that they aren't relying on us.
Aren't relying on any one person.
Well, yeah.
I mean, we do a lot there where even our GM, we make sure that there's people that can do everything she does, if something were to happen to her.
Well, and when we brought her into the equation, it was to replace me. And then I said, but okay, well, what if happens to Marlene? Well, the good news is then we have Dave and Carla, right? We are our own form of redundancy. Since then, we built a whole leadership team and a management team that they all intertwined can run the business so that they can go on vacation. So I just wanted to point that out because the sellability and the finances is definitely a big part of why we go into business and build assets to take care of our family. But man, if we're not responsible with the way that we build those assets and the way that we run them, and Carla, you talked about it a minute ago, I really think that the reason a lot of people do this is it's just easier. And on a day by day basis, it is easier, right? Now, once you've built something, I don't think it actually is easier. I have way more fun running my businesses today than I did 15 years ago.
But the initial teaching someone else, I'm horrible at delegating too, because I know if I do it myself, it's going to get done right and I can just do it. And I'm not taking the time to teach someone else how to do it and then trust that they'll do it correctly. It's hard.
Anybody that's ever raised a kid knows that it's easier to just cut their sandwich for them than to sit there and teach them how to cut their sandwich, right? But you're going to end up with an 18-year-old that doesn't know how to cut their own sandwich, Right. I mean, this is kind of crazy. And that's kind of what we do in business. And I know I'm rambling a little bit. This is something I'm pretty passionate about, which is why I've connected with you so well, Mike. But the truth of the matter is there is a significant difference. And I didn't used to know this. There's a significant difference in being an employee of someone else's business and being self-employed. But there's also a significant difference in being self-employed and being a business owner. And I think the first two we know and we understand and we talk about, but the last two, the difference in being self-employed and being a business owner, meaning the business doesn't require you for the day-to-day operations of the business, that's not easy to do, but it is possible to do. And so one of the reasons we do episodes like this and even share our story is just so people know it's possible. Because in our industry, Mike, there's a lot of people that talk about it's not possible.
The margins aren't
there. The skill isn't there. The talent isn't there. And in the past 40 years ago, that might have been true. I wasn't around, but I know it is today.
I think we have a vocabulary problem in this industry because if I ask you, is your business ready for sale? You say, I don't want to sell my business. And I can dismiss the context. We talk about, have you done some exit planning? And you say, I don't want to exit. What we forget is the sellability. That's just the framing. right?
Yep.
But the language, to your point, and it's so important, the language doesn't always get us there. It puts us in a place where we can dismiss this. I don't want you to, I tell my clients that one of the things I hope for them, and it's the reason I don't work on commission, is because I've watched owners fall back in love with their business as they go through this process, right? As they make a sellable business, they fall back in love with it. And then, to your point, Dave, I'd like to buy a second laundromat. Well, you know, the only way you can do that is if you're not required to run the first.
Yep.
And you can go that path, you can exit, you can keep owning the thing for the next 30 years, but all of that comes from a sellability framing that allows you to answer yes to those three questions, right?
And Mike,
yeah.
And I'll add on to that, man, even if they do or they don't in any particular day, you know what we have, which is I think what we're all really wanting and fighting for in the entrepreneurship world is freedom.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis, I can choose. If today I think I wouldn't sell my business for X, but if tomorrow I change my mind or God changes my mind or I'm not here anymore and Carla decides to sell it, man, I sure want it to be as valuable as possible, as polished as possible. And if she wants to continue to run it, even though she's maybe not me in the operational world, I've built up such an amazing team that they can actually teach her the things she doesn't know that I did know, right? And that was always my motivation. So I don't know that it really matters what your motivation is. I just like to point out to people that it's really just not a sell the business or not sell the business. Man, there's a whole lot of middle ground in between these two that whether you think you have control over or not, you don't. I don't know. I hate to be morbid, but the truth is that's just the way my brain works. I've always been kind of a long-term thinker, and unfortunately I've had a lot of trauma in my life at a young age. And so I tend to look at things through
The
a
bus
little bit.
test.
I tend to look at things through a little bit different lens than most people, and I consider it an asset. I really do. I think it drives my wife crazy sometimes, but if something happened to me tomorrow, she'd probably be pretty happy that I did this.
Yeah. And again, even if nothing bad happens tomorrow, to be able to approach tomorrow with a level of freedom to make decisions that that's one of the biggest single professional lessons of my life. Is how different this life experience as a business owner can be from what I thought it was, right? My first experience, 15 years, 0 to 50 employees, first decade of that, I'm just freaking overwhelmed. I'm 18-hour day, I'm all in, and working for nothing. It's just ugly. And then to find out that not only can you change that and have it be different, but you can do that intentionally. The flip side of it is part of the reason I like to tell the story that I did is that you realize how consequential that first decision 5.5 years earlier is to the ability to actually do this. Because if I had actually closed the deal for 630, there's 5 years of effort and work for nothing at the end because I made a bad purchase, right? And so there's so much opportunity to learn and there's so much opportunity for upside. Back to the earlier comments about the urgency that some buyers approach this process with. You can give away the next 5-10 years of your life if you do this stuff wrong, carelessly.
I've seen it happen so many times. I'm sure you have too, Mike, and it breaks my heart. It just breaks my heart.
If we can actually go back a little bit to your laundromat journey, I know, so you ended up selling it a few years later for 2.5 what you paid for it. One thing we didn't touch on is so I know the improvements you made as far as just record keeping, and actually paying his bills and, having vendors that would actually deliver their services because you paid them and all that. But were there any other changes you made to the business? I know you mentioned it needed a new roof. What other investments had you made into that business to get it to be worth that 2.5x?
Yeah, great question. A couple of key ones stick out to me, and I know I've heard the two of you refer to this in the past. I think one deficit that I often see in these kinds of businesses, car wash, laundromat, businesses where there is significant value to be gained by someone who can turn a wrench, is that they sometimes attract people who turn wrenches. And that may not be the same person who sees the value of marketing, who sees the value of some of these other soft business skills that, for me, create a fundamental change for that business, right? Tuesday specials. What does it mean to do this? Hey, clients want to process with credit cards. Let's get the readers and right. Some of these things that go past my ability to fix the machine on my own and save $150. That's really important stuff. I had an employee that could do that stuff, and they're invaluable, right? I mean, huge. But to your question, Carla, I think part of the other stuff was the peripheral. How am I making buying decisions for soap for the car wash? Some of those kinds of more purely business related decision making. Keep in mind, we had an absentee owner and a manager that was a turn the wrench guy, but there was no marketing, there was no sales, there was no purchasing systems. All of that benefited from the painful lesson I had learned from 15 years of ownership up to that point.
A lot of owners today still think that's what's important. And I always say, I'm not here to tell you it's not important. I'm just telling you, you're missing about a third of the business.
That's right. And that's the profit part, right?
It is.
See that
Yeah, that's
with
kind
a
of
business,
important.
right? There's so little incremental cost in the next wash, right? The first wash costs you $1 million. That's the car wash thing. The first car you wash costs you $1 million. The second one costs you 72 cents.
That's really true. And in case you're wondering what he's referring to, he's talking about the fixed expenses associated with a capital-intensive business. Whether it's a laundromat or a car wash, these are capital-intensive businesses. Once you absorb our fixed costs, our profit margins go through the roof for every turn thereafter, or every wash thereafter, for every load of laundry thereafter.
That's right.
And a lot of people miss that too. So
yeah, well, and that's where that third comes in, right? That you talk about. So many of the owners I run into, they're barely paying themselves market rate salary to go do the work somewhere else, right? And that yet they're carrying all the headache. And unfortunately, way too many of them are carrying that heavy burden because they believe that their payoff is at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm not making any money now, but when I sell this place, I'm going to clean up. That's not how it works, folks. You don't get a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow unless you've earned some gold along the way.
Yeah,
I learned it after a decade in my first business when I went to sell it.
Yeah,
and they're like,
and that's
not enough cash flow, 2 owner dependent. Blah. I'm like, there's no pot of gold.
That's what I was getting ready to say. In episode 81, when we had Mike on the first time, that was kind of where we started the episode, and that's where you traveled the journey you've traveled now, as you thought that too, right?
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I'm so glad we got to revisit this and really learn your laundromat journey. And I think there was a lot of valuable nuggets, as Dave always says, in that, to show people not only the acquisition journey that you went through and the importance of due diligence and really not jumping on a deal just because you get excited, making sure that that deal's viable, but then also, making sure once you get into that laundromat, making sure that your operations and your record keeping are up to snuff so that you actually do have that valuable asset. Before we go today, though, what would you like to, any final words for our audience, or how can they find you? I don't think we mentioned your company yet, Exit Oasis, for your coaching services. How can they get in touch with you?
Thank you. ExitOasis.com. I'm real active on LinkedIn, so please look me up there, and love engaging business owners about this subject there.
Awesome. Well, man, whether you own a laundromat or a car wash or anything else, Mike's services apply. And whether you plan on selling or you don't plan on selling, or you think your business is sellable or it's not sellable, you probably should engage with Mike and just find out for sure. Because chances are it's probably not quite as polished as maybe you think it is. And maybe he can help you for just a small amount of money and probably a little bit of time, really point some eye-opening things to you. I know I'm very grateful for us connecting just on LinkedIn and the power of just seeing your posts and videos and different things like that and other podcasts you're on. And I know I'm grateful for having my own podcast where I can have you on as a guest and kind of pick your brain a little bit, and we're a little bit smarter after every episode too. So we would definitely recommend checking out Mike on LinkedIn. If you're not following me on LinkedIn, let's connect as well. Carla doesn't do social media, so sorry.
Good for you.
Yeah,
I know.
I always tell her I'm a little bit jealous. I mean, I love it, but I'm a little bit jealous too.
It's too much drama.
Anyway. All right, guys. Mike, first of all, thanks for joining us today, man. This was super helpful. If you haven't went back and checked out episode 81 of the podcast, I'd recommend you do that, because Mike really brought the heat in both of these episodes. A lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. Reach out to Mike through his website. We'll see you guys next time for another episode of the Laundromat Millionaire Show, sponsored by HM Company at DrainTroughs.com.